Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, the school board controls 55% of Montgomery County budget, so why is it so difficult for candidates to raise money? County Council increases subsidies for new businesses. What should happen to White Ferry? And what are the political comparisons between 1968 and 2024? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the former county council member and president at Rebuilding Together Montgomery County, Nancy Floreen, secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. One of the first political lessons I learned from my father when I was a young lad was if someone has political aspirations, they need to be elected to something. For want of a better term, they need to be elected dog catcher so they can prove their bona fides. Marion Barry in D.C. rose from being head of Pride Incorporated to D.C. school board member, then councilman, and finally mayor for life. Doug Duncan became a nonpartisan mayor of the city of Rockville before he ran for county executive. And there's other examples all over the place. So it was shocking to me when Adam Pagnucco wrote in his blog, Montgomery Perspective, about the difficulty the school board candidates are having to raise money for their campaigns. Nancy, the school board handles more money and is more responsible for over 50% of the budget than the county council. Why is it so hard for these guys to raise money and have competitive races?
Well, I would say largely members of the school board are not in it for the end game of some or view this as a stepping stone. They're really in it because they care. Only Nancy Navarro, I think, and Valerie Irvin are members of the Board of Ed that moved on to another job. But, it's hard to raise money. Typically, they've relied on the Apple Ballot to get their word out. We used to have press. We used to have the Gazette, we used to have the Journal, something that would tell the average person what was going on in the Board of Education. But we don't have that anymore. So it's up to them to learn how to ask everybody they've ever known for money. And that's not an easy thing to do for most people. So I'm sure that's why, in large case, they're not raising the cash. And so we'll see what effect that has on their the election primary coming up.
Well, but there is some antipathy towards this school board because of what's been going on for the past couple of years. And so maybe we'll see that incumbents don't have the natural advantage that one might have thought.
Right. I mean, it's true. And the people don't know much about the incumbents anyway. So we'll see.
Yeah, isn't that, it's just it's mind-boggling to me. Mark, what do you think? I mean, the Apple Ballot, as Nancy mentioned, is extremely strong. There's an effort to get, I guess, another ballot out, the blue ballot, I believe is what it's called, to endorse some additional candidates. I think, there was a group that formed 2 years ago or 4 years ago to endorse, these are nonpartisan races, to endorse people who seem to have a reasonable effort. So what's the answer here?
Well, what's interesting, I thought Adam's coverage was really fascinating. I had noticed that in other counties in Maryland, there has been in recent years far more competitive Board of Education races, in which there's a kind of where the frustration that occurred as a result of COVID has manifested itself with candidates coming forward. I confess I was at a fundraiser in Anne Arundel for a Board of Education member that involved Governor Ehrlich, who was one of the guests and what have you, and there were protesters on the outside. It's interesting. In other counties in the state, there has been much more of a flashpoint than apparently is taking place in Montgomery County.
Well, I mean, we have seen parents, be more vocal over the past 2 years. Particularly, the Muslim community has been vocal about some of the gender specific books that have been read. But it doesn't seem like there's the same level of activity we see in, Loudon County, Virginia, Fairfax County, Virginia, or as you say, in others. Although there is one candidate running who is one of the Moms for Liberty candidates. So, I mean, will we see any changes as we go forward?
Well, of course, it's two-step process. So you have the primary, and then the candidates from that will go into the general election. And so it's always a question as to see who are the pairings that will take place that go forward to November. But
yeah, but
right.
it can't. If you don't make the primary cut, you're not in the ball game. You're out, right, Nancy? I mean, it's either you make the primary or not.
Yeah, and with the lack of information, it'd be really curious. I'll be really curious to see what the actual vote numbers are for the Board of Ed candidates. We'll see what turnout is in any event, but particularly for that group, which is a nonpartisan situation, not associated with any particular candidate that people might care about. We'll see how it works.
I'm gonna take that question that you just posed about turnout, and we'll save that to our last segment because that'll fit in very well with that topic. We got to go on to what the county council is doing with respect to economic development. In the post-COVID world, it comes as no surprise that Montgomery County office vacancy is nearing 22%. Frankly, it's more of a surprise that it's only 22%, given the reluctance of employers and employees to return to office. The county council, struggles with this constantly, and this week they voted to increase the incentives it's going to offer businesses to relocate to Montgomery County, or for that matter, remain in Montgomery County. It's unclear what the criteria will be for that. Mark, Montgomery County loves to throw money at problems, but is this the better solution, or are there better solutions?
Well, this is one of the great challenges of the county, is they're forever trying to subsidize their way out of a problem that they've created or has been created. Ours, whether it's obviously office vacancies or it's affordable housing. Probably one of the things we need to do is to see more conversion of some of the office space that's empty into housing. And perhaps that's a way of solving two issues, or not solving, but at least addressing two sets of issues at the same time. This conversion process is frankly taking place in office areas around the country.
Well, but that office conversion is not always an easy task.
Oh, it's a tough
the design
one.
of the buildings. An office building doesn't have the same, risers and stacks, wet stacks for plumbing and whatnot. So and ceiling heights. I mean, window lines. I mean, there are all kind of things that have to go into converting a property from office to. And maybe the county will need to do some incentives of some kind, rather than just throwing money at it. Nancy, you've been on the planning board, you've been on the council. I mean, that economic development is, several decades long problem. What can the county do to encourage it? Or they haven't found the formula yet.
They haven't tried, let me tell you. I would not blame the vacancy rate issue on the county. You can blame a lot of things in the county, but not that. I mean, that is a product of COVID and the marketplace generally. This new incentive program is nothing new. Actually, we adopted it when I was on the council, called the MOVE program. I proposed it. And again, any incentives to businesses to keep them, to attract them, is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. What can we do about economic development generally? Well, we have to have people out selling the county aggressively. When I was on the council, I actually created the Economic Development Corporation, which has moved in bits and starts to advance that issue. But the leadership of the county has not been out there on economic development, not like you see in other jurisdictions in other states. And I think that's our biggest loss. We don't have that kind of public statement of how welcoming Montgomery County is to businesses. And when we do things like pass rent control, we send the opposite message: don't come here. We're a pain in the neck. And our rules are more demanding than most jurisdictions for development, per se. And so that's backed up in the private sector. So that's the challenge. We need to change our ways. Hasn't happened yet. I don't see it happening in the future.
So, but are we also not getting enough support from the state, or is that not an issue?
I don't know. I don't think we've tried hard enough. We certainly did with getting Hopkins here, the Life Sciences Center. That's been an advantage. But we keep opposing roadway improvements, transportation improvements that we need. Things like the Beltway, they shut that down. Expanding 270, same problem. Montgomery County is not the place where you hear yes a lot. And that is a disadvantage to our ability to grow. And I'm not sure elected people care that much.
And let
Mark,
me
any
just
final thoughts?
I was just going to underscore what Nancy was saying about transportation. That is a huge impediment to economic development.
Well, what a nice way to dovetail into our next topic,
I
because
should be saying the opposite, I suppose, as an official Democrat here. But
well, I don't know, Nancy.
I'm just me. What can I say?
We'll let you. We'll wait for Let me introduce the next topic, and then you can opine. So, for the past 3 years, that limited link between Montgomery County and Loudon County, Virginia, across the Potomac at White's Ferry has been closed, forcing commuters to make an excruciatingly long trip on either side of the river to the Capitol Beltway and then beyond. So after fits and starts, the owners of White's Ferry, they don't know what to do. They've offered to donate the ferry to Montgomery County. Nancy, why would the county want to engage in such a boondoggle?
Well, the problem is not Montgomery County, it's Virginia. And I'm not sure our ownership of White's Ferry makes any big improvement there. And I think that the Virginia side is is a privately owned piece of property. So, it's a whole different kettle of fish in Virginia, and whether county executives could actually get together and work this out in some way. I mean, they've had that opportunity for years. I haven't seen anything happening. Presumably there is a solution somewhere. People have talked about different kinds of connections that could avoid some troublesome private property ownership issues. But, it's a different world over there in Virginia.
Well, it certainly may be. Mark, but isn't the real world solution to this problem what we were talking about in the last segment? The lack of building new roadways and the lack of improvements. In fact, we need another bridge across the Potomac.
We certainly need more capacity to get across the Potomac. Building, after all we went through with the ICC, I shudder to think whether we could build another bridge in this century across the Potomac, but we certainly need more capacity to get across.
Well, I mean, this is the conundrum that we will all have. I mean, White's Ferry is going to be just an expense for the county until we find a solution, and frankly, it doesn't relieve the traffic that greatly because of its lack of capacity.
What we really need from Virginia is support on eminent domain to force the issue. As Nancy referenced, there's a private landowner that owns the landing on the Virginia side that has been asking for more money, and that's why things have been closed down for, I guess, 4 years now, I think it is. This is an important transportation link, and we ought to figure out a way to be able to resolve this.
The other thing, though, is that I don't think it really adds that much capacity. It's a minor crossing. It's convenient for some people. Have you ever been there? It's a pain to get out there. If you several miles past Poolsville, there's no easy connection. And for people who live up county who need to go to Virginia, I would think they go up through Frederick and across up there.
Probably.
But this issue has been studied every which way, as you know, for many, many years. Montgomery County has always said They didn't want a connection. Now, Virginia has said that too. I mean, a roadway connection at that location. There are other connections that could be improved, but it wouldn't be in our in Montgomery County.
And it won't be in our
There's a
lifetime.
lot of talk about that.
I will say, though, when I talk to Virginians, and I'm involved with a fair amount on transportation issues, they would love to see a second crossing. It's always kind of fascinating on the other side of the river how eager they are to see a stronger connection somewhere up from the American Legion Bridge.
Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. That was a great discussion. When we come back from this short break, what are the political comparisons between 1968 and 2024? Stay tuned.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
And welcome back. While watching the news the other night, I closed my eyes and I thought I heard the chants and protests at Columbia University. And when I opened my eyes, I wasn't dreaming about the Vietnam War protests from 56 years ago, but they were actually occurring today over the war in the Middle East. Then I thought, what exactly are the parallels between 1968 and 2024? Let's see. The country's divided. We're not sure where we're going in terms of international affairs. There's not really a consensus on a lot of issues. There's a lot of voter apathy. If you looked at 1968 and now, a lot of Democrats aren't necessarily happy with their nominee, and a lot of Republicans aren't happy with theirs. So Nancy, what's your view on the comparisons between this year and this election season and 56 years ago?
Well, of course, we were all in our prime then. So we remember that time very well. You know, I don't think it's the same. I don't think, certainly, you know, in the 60s, we were sending people to Vietnam and they were dying. It was a very, very upsetting time. What's sad is that the civil rights issues are still continuing. And that, you know, is awful. What we also have now that we didn't have then is a kind of constant media presence. You know, breaking news, somebody, you know, spilled a cup of coffee somewhere. Everything is a crisis now for people. And I think that has us feeling that there are more crises out there than there really are. The far right and the far left get way more attention now than they ever used to. But back in the 60s, we had this revolt of younger people that we had never had before. And I think that was sort of a moment of change for this country. And it may be that we kind of forgot about that until more recently when the campuses have actually erupted with concerns about what's happening in Gaza. There had not been that much of that over the years.
Mark, what's your view of it? And then I want to ask you both about what impact we're going to see on the political election this year. So
I think there, particularly among Democrats, there's a very sharp generational divide that we're seeing in these protests, which has a real parallel to 1968, where you had an older generation in 68 of Cold War liberal Democrats who were anti-communists and had grown up in that period and the pushback on Vietnam. And there was a sharp divide. And we're now, I think, seeing a very similar divide on the campuses between on the issue of support for Israel and what would be an appropriate solution in the Middle East. So I do see a very strong parallels, and also I think a shock in the older generation to see a younger generation kind of turning on what had been for many, but at least for them, had been sort of accepted wisdom or accepted sort of strong positions.
Well, you know, I mean, what we're hearing is not only is Columbia at issue, but there are 200, at least 200 college campuses around the country where these active protests are going. We're hearing about graduation ceremonies being canceled. We're also hearing about this is going to continue all the way through to Chicago and the Democratic convention. So, Nancy, if these protests continue, what impact will it have on the presidential race?
Boy, blast from the past, huh?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to have a lot to do with it. I mean, are they going to push for a new third party candidate? Is it going to come out and swing the election one way or the other? I don't think so. I think this is less purely political than policy. And, you know, a lot of people have very mixed feelings about this situation out there. And I don't think that the dividing lines are as strong as Mark suggests in terms of public opinion for those who are following this issue. So I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think the real question is, I think it's going to be a question of turnout. It's always a question of turnout. And you know, ultimately, are Republicans going to show up to vote for Mr. Trump? Are Democrats going to sit home because they're annoyed with Biden over our support for Israel? Those are going to be the issues going forward. But I think the other issues on the ballot in terms of abortion rights and the other kind of policy issues that really get people moving will get them to the polls.
We're gonna see. And Mark, you know, Richard Nixon took the violence that occurred at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago as a major, campaign point that led to his victory. So could we see that kind of activity this year?
Well, I do think that there's not as much support for these student protesters as there even was in 1968 when there was, as Nancy mentioned, concern about the war. I think it's going to be very polarizing, and it's going to put the Biden administration in a very difficult position to balance between these frankly irreconcilable positions.
Well, it's rather remarkable that what we're seeing today. Of course, what's going on in Gaza and in Israel is a terrible war that is ongoing. But wars do happen, and we have to figure out a foreign policy to address the best interests of the United States. Thank you both. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Thank you, and welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Casey, in another couple weeks on May 6th, the Maryland Republican Party will be honoring Ellen Sauerbrey, who was, of course, the candidate for governor in 1994 and 1998. And really was, how shall I say, the mother of the modern Republican Party in our state. It's a great event that's going to be taking place up north of Baltimore, and certainly welcome people to come and honor one of the greats of Maryland politics.
Thank you, Mark. Nancy Floreen, your parting shot.
Indeed. Last weekend of April is always a big one for Rebuilding Together. It's National Rebuilding Day, and all over the country, volunteers from the community are out there in the community fixing people's homes at no charge to those property owners. So I want to do a shout out to the organizations that are doing it this weekend here. The tower companies, Frisco Woodbine, Kynoch Environmental Management, Tacoma Park Seventh-day Adventist Church, Embrace Home Loans, St. Mark's, Holy Cross, Bethesda United Church of Christ, Christ Episcopal, Davis Construction, Sandy Spring Bank, Good Shepherd Church, Niels Road Presbyterian, Gaithersburg Presbyterian, and Helping Hands Poolsville. It's a real statement of what Montgomery County is all about. I'm really proud of all these people, and we should be all grateful to them for what they do. And we're going to have a celebration of them on May 30th out at Smoky Glen Farm. I hope you all join us to celebrate these great community members.
Well, thank you, Nancy. And it's a great organization you lead, but it is also reminding that Americans are very charitable by nature, and it's great to see so many people involved in your activity. I want to thank you both for being here today. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.